Hello and welcome to a special edition of Thrust Over the World. I'm joined today by probably the most talked about man in the world at the moment, Julian Assange. He's the founder of WikiLeaks website and so on, which is currently releasing over a quarter of a million confidential, though not necessarily top secret, American diplomatic cables. He's here in the UK fighting extradition to Sweden, where he's wanted on charges of sexual crimes. He's here now, though, and we'll start, obviously, and then continue with him. Julian, just to start with, do you feel that any state has a right, any government has a right to have secrets at all, ideally?
There's a practical need to have secrets in certain circumstances for particular bodies and institutions. That is a long-term matter of history. Your doctor has a need to keep your medical records secret in nearly, but not all, circumstances. But that is not to say that all others must obey that need. Media has a right and an obligation to the public to get out information that the public needs to know. Similarly, some intelligence services have an obligation to go about their activities to the best of their ability, and that sometimes involves secrecy. But what is not a right is for a general or Hillary Clinton to say that they want to use the criminal law on every person in the country to stop talking about embarrassing information that has been revealed from her institution or from the US military. She does not have the right to proclaim what the law is. That's a matter for the court. She does not have the right to use the coercive power of police, armed police, to stop journalists and publishers from publishing. She does not have that right.
What about the right that, for instance, that the Brits and the Americans and others had to conceal where they were going to strike back at Germany, where in France they were going to strike back? The revelation of that secret ahead of time could have destroyed the whole attempt to strike back at Germany. Would that be valid?
Well, we don't need to go to hypotheticals. We have a 4-year publishing history. During that time, we have published millions of documents. We can see what actually happens in practice in the 21st century with our organisation, with me as editor-in-chief. And what we see, there is not a single incidence of anyone being physically harmed by what we've done. There's not even a single incidence of a government alleging that we have that. Not even the Pentagon alleged that. In fact, the Pentagon admits that it cannot find a single incidence of anyone being harmed.
Do you, at the moment, fear the possibility of some form or other of being delivered back to the United States?
It's a serious problem. I mean, lawyers are discussing this every day. US officials are making public statements that they are trying to do that. The Attorney General, Eric Holder, spokespeople for the Justice Department and so on. There is pressure that is being applied to one of our alleged sources, Bradley Manning, in his prison cell. He is a young former intelligence analyst, been held in Quantico, Virginia, for some 6 months now, prior to trial, and there is pressure on him through his physical cell conditions, according to his lawyer David Coombs, to coerce him into testifying against me or against our organisation, to try and suggest that there is some kind of conspiracy to commit espionage, which there is not. I've never heard of his name before it appeared in the media, but that's what they're trying to push for. It's a serious business. And why are they going after WikiLeaks? Well, they want to stop this publication of information that embarrasses them. But why are they going after me? There is a particular reason, which is they have been tremendously embarrassed. The State Department, the US military, has been tremendously embarrassed by these abuses being revealed. So what do you do if you're embarrassed? Well, you want to save face. How do you save face? You have to slap the face of the person who is perceived to have embarrassed you. And because I am the most recognisable person for WikiLeaks, I am the target.
And that makes you... Therefore, in that situation, do you think... We said deportation, we're talking about basically there, but do you fear that you will end up in an American jail?
That's a problem. My lawyers certainly fear that I will end up in American jail, either directly through extradition from here or from extradition from Sweden. That is a serious problem.
Which would be more dangerous to you? Is it worse if they're trying to extradite you from the UK or from Sweden, or are you equally vulnerable from either to the United States?
Advice from my lawyers is that Sweden is much more dangerous.
Much more?
Much more dangerous.
Dangerous.
Because there is political... The way these extradition treaties are done, there is usually an exemption for political reasons. So you don't have to extradite someone if it's a political issue. And espionage is the classical political offence. So if they tried to frame publishing as espionage and then latched onto this conspiracy to commit espionage, that would then activate, if you like, a defence for saying that the extradition was political in nature.
Just going back for a moment to early days, when you co-founded WikiLeaks, what was your action motto, phrase? What was your basic aim?
Well, our phrase was "Courage is contagious," but which it is.
That's a great slogan, incidentally.
Yes, we look at transatlantic aeroplane flight. In the 1930s, 1920s, this was one of the most heroic acts you could perform, and almost no one did it. Now everyone does it. Why? Because there's examples of other people doing it and succeeding. Now no one thinks anything about how courageous it is to get on an aeroplane to cross the Atlantic. So we could see early on that we could encourage, through successful examples, people to step forward to reveal abuses by governments. And by doing that, we could produce a more just civilization.
America was possibly your leading target, wasn't it? Not your only target, but your leading target.
No, it was actually the most closed societies in the beginning, and the most corrupt ones. And the United States is not the most closed or the most corrupt. On the other hand, what we found in practice was that the United States is, as the dominant empire, is connected to all the other countries and has a tendril in them. And being the largest security state, spending approximately the same amount as all the rest of the world combined on its military intelligence sector, it generates a tremendous amount of secrets. And being involved in two very unpopular wars in the United States, it also generates a lot of dissenters. And those dissenters tap into a great American tradition of free speech, of government accountability. And they're saying, my institution is not accountable in the way that I thought it was, that I told it was. And then they pass this material out. So that's why we have such a focus recently on the United States. It's not that we go asking for material from the United States, rather it is people within the United States, good people, dissenters in the United States, come forward and they give us material. We are source-driven. We can only publish what people are giving us. And in the United States, they are giving us a lot of material.
So that would mean that, therefore, as you say, you're source-driven, so you're never going to get a fair, equal share of material from China, North Korea, etc.
China we are getting some decent material from and have, as it's becoming more internet connected. North Korea, you're right, we haven't received anything directly from North Korea. North Korea is blockaded from the internet, so that's not a surprise. But we do get, because the world is connected, actually we do have a lot of material about North Korea from other countries, providing angles on what is going on in North Korea.
Do you ever pay for the secrets you get?
No. We have no philosophical objection to paying, actually.
You just need the money.
Why should journalists and lawyers be the only one to be compensated for their risks when actually it's the source who is taking the greatest risk? No, it is simply being that we are overwhelmed with the amount of material that courageous whistleblowers are giving to us. So we're not at the stage where that extra incentive needs to be given, but we have absolutely no philosophical objection to that.
How do you finance the operation? And is it profit-making or loss-making?
Well, until the beginning of this year, I financed, together with some of my friends, the entire operation, with the majority of the money coming from me. Actually, there's a reason why investigative journalism has never been historically funded by the government. It has not been funded by big business. It has been funded by readers and advertisers.
And do you think of yourself, do you see references to yourself as anarchic or an anarchist? Is that an accurate description of what you are?
No, it's not at all an accurate description.
Why not?
Well, that's not what we do. We're an organisation that goes about and has a long record all over the world of exposing abuses by exposing concrete documentation, proof of bad behaviour. That's not anarchy. That's what people do when they're civil, is that they engage in organised activity that promotes justice.
I see. So therefore it's, in that sense, you're not anarchic because you're in favour of authority if it's doing the right thing. You're
Correct.
Not automatically opposed to
Correct.
authority.
Having run an organisation, I understand the difficulties in building an institution, having a good institution. Institutions are very important. I mean, anyone who's worked in Africa, as I have, knows that successful civil institutions don't just come from nowhere. You will find the difference going between particular African countries or European and African countries that, clean roads and so on don't just come from nowhere. There is an institutional infrastructure behind this. But secret institutions start to become corrupted in their purpose. They are able to engage in secret plans which would be opposed by the population if the population knew, and then carry them out for their own internal purposes. So not performing the function that the people demand that they perform.
And in terms of the situations that you come across and so on, that is there anybody who is really leading the campaign against you at the moment, or do you feel that it's a rather opaque group?
I think it's fascinating. We have seen MasterCard, Europe Visa, Amazon, PayPal, a Swiss bank, all financially censor us after pressure from the United States government. Not legal pressure, all done under the table. So what's going on there? Is MasterCard leading the campaign against us? Of course not. It is the Washingtonian network of big business, politicians, people in the military, the diplomatic area, that network of friends, cross-shareholdings that spreads out from Washington and into Western countries. It's not a purely American phenomenon, it's interlinked across the Western world.
And there's a sort of, which even though you're the subject of this, you see the humour, if that's the right word, in it. But I mean, obviously you've got the situation that you're coming up with all this material that's revealing things about people that they would prefer not to be published. And then you get absolutely lumbered in the middle of a situation where, in reverse, that's what's happening to you in Sweden. And you don't want all this stuff published in Sweden about the alleged rape, which was then withdrawn as a rape, and talking about sexual advances and so on. But I mean, it's ironic in a way that it's you getting it, someone putting it back to you. Or is it not ironic?
Really. It's not ironic. It's actually much deeper and dangerous than that. We're an organisation a little organisation that helps individual people inside an abusive organisation expose the abuse by some powerful group. What has happened to me is that a powerful organisation, at least the Swedish Police Prosecution Service, maybe Swedish intelligence, we don't know precisely what the interference is with this case, has breached their stated internal obligations, breached the law to first pump out my name, and just recently, in the last few days, to selectively take bits of the police investigative file, the most prejudicial bits they could find, and pump this out to the Guardian newspaper just before my court hearing. Pump it out to Le Monde. Pump it out to the New York Times. Why? Who's doing that? That's a dirty trick. That's a clear dirty trick.
Some of those journals were the allies of yours a few days ago, and you were feeding them stuff. The Guardian, for instance, the New York Times, and so on.
That's not true. It's where we have a business arrangement, but the particular journalist, Guardian's a big place.
Yeah.
Has lots of journalists. The particular journalist that they picked has a public record because of some ridiculous dispute we had about an embargo arrangement, has publicly said that he is personally opposed to me, and in fact refused to work on Cablegate, the biggest journalistic story of the past 10 years. He is the one that was picked to launder that information through. Someone they knew would write in a negative way. Who would do that? Who had access to that material? Who was sophisticated enough to send it out to our media partners, to the particular journalists that they knew would write in a negative way?
And the answer to your question, your answer to that question?
I don't know. You can see who benefits, who might have the ability to do it. Clearly someone connected at some stage to the government in Sweden. Maybe something was stolen from the government in Sweden. Who would have the capacities to steal something from the government in Sweden?
But why would the government of Sweden obviously care about this?
Well, there's not. Whenever we talk about a government, we're actually talking about individuals.
Lots of people.
Yeah, we're talking about lots of individuals in government who work in particular sectors, who have friends, a family, and so on. In Sweden, we 2 weeks ago had the front page with Cablegate material, and every major newspaper in Sweden, the biggest newspaper, Aftonbladet, SVD, we then had a 44-minute documentary on it, Swedish television, equivalent to the BBC, showing what the US ambassador was writing about Sweden. And what he was writing, Sweden is really in NATO. We pretend that it's not, but it really is. Was writing that there is intelligence sharing arrangements of all types, and we have to keep it secret from Parliament. Not even most members of the government know what's going on. It is arguably a violation of the Swedish constitution, so we're going to keep it all quiet. We saw the opposition leader in the recent election being hauled in to the US embassy. Why? Because she had made statements saying that when we get elected, we're going to take Swedish troops out of Afghanistan. She came in and she said, don't worry about that. That's just all for the people. Once we're in government, we're not going to do that. That opposition leader, head of the Social Democrats. Social Democrats is the same political party that Claes Borgström is from. Claes Borgström is a politician who ran in the last election. He's also the principal public advocate for the two women who are alleging these crimes.
And obviously you've denied crimes in that case vigorously, obviously, and so on. But you presumably don't deny having had sex with them.
I don't talk about, there's things of that that's a matter of public record, but I think it's not right for me to do a couple of things. And it's hard because of different cultural values, but my cultural values is that a man does not talk about his private life, and a man does not criticize women. Certainly he doesn't criticize women before he knows all the facts are in. In this case, we have just recently got a translation of part of one of the statements by a close friend of one of the women. And she says that she, one of the women, told her that she was bamboozled by police and other people into this position, and she's very unhappy about it. So maybe it's not actually all a scheme from the women. although there is some suggestive evidence that that is true. But maybe it's not. Maybe they are innocent victims who were bamboozled into making statements that they didn't really want to make.
So, but why wouldn't you go back to Sweden in the sense, does it mean you feel, which would be a clear point, I mean, do you feel that you can't get a fair trial in Sweden at the moment?
It's very interesting you asked that point, because this was a point made by the prosecution here, who applied to make sure I was in solitary confinement, that I was denied bail. Then when bail was granted, rightly so, appealed all the way to the High Court to prevent me being out on bail. And one of the arguments used was that they thought that I thought I would not get a fair trial in Sweden. So if I say that I believe I'm not going to get a fair trial in Sweden, that there's no juries in Sweden, that half the juries are appointed by the Social Democrats, that's how, sorry, not juries, half the panel of judges is appointed by the political party that is involved in this. If I say that sort of thing, suggests that I don't have confidence in the Swedish judicial system, then my bail will be cancelled and I will go to prison. So I have to look into the situation as to whether there is a fair trial possibility in Sweden or not. That is something that we are researching. That is something I want to understand before I'm extradited back to Sweden. What I want to understand is what are the charges? Who is behind this? The prosecution has refused to give to the British courts any evidence, has said that it doesn't need and doesn't want to give any evidence. And by evidence, I don't mean photographs or something like this. By evidence, I mean even the statements, even the initial complaint, it's refusing to hand over. That's not a situation that I feel that it is right to walk into. I feel it is right that since I haven't even been charged, since I am offering to do all sorts of interviews, for them to come here and say, well, we want to talk to you about what exactly. That should happen first. And we have an opportunity in the British legal system, which is more open, to get some of this information out, to find out what this is really about and demonstrate publicly that something is not going on here that is right, that there are clear dirty tricks, at least in the abusive process. How did my name get out in the first place? Why did the most senior prosecutor in Sweden say not only that there was no evidence, she said, I've read everything, there is not even a suspicion that he has committed a rape. Then intervention of this politician, Claes Borgström, comes about, passed off to another prosecutor in Gothenburg, not in Stockholm. What is going on?
And that's the question that you most of all, but everybody will be interested to know the answer. Julian Assange, we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Dave.